Hey everyone, Babs Hockey here with the first ever Player Coach podcast. Here I'll give you an illustration of different perspectives from a player and a coach, and then give you the latest in hockey IQ development so that you can make better decisions and take your game to that next level. So today for the episode, I want to talk about context, specifically how important it is when you're trying to understand what you're doing and why you're doing it. So with social media now, it seems to be a grounds for a lot of discussion of it should be this way, no, it should be that way. I actually shouldn't even say discussion, really, like it's a lot of arguments. And it's sad because really we don't understand the context. Context is key. Without it, we don't really understand the why or understand what the coach is trying to develop for that specific player. Like I talked about in the last podcast, it's so important to understand each individual's needs and what they need to do to get better. And so when you understand the context of why this player is working on this skill or why this coach is teaching this particular way, then you'll have a better understanding of why they're doing it and then have a more enlightened view versus this guy has no clue what he's doing, or this guy's an absolute idiot. Like, why would I talk to him, or why would I even listen to him? And so it's a very closed-minded perspective, and that's the sad thing about social media. And so we want to avoid that. We really want to use context to understand why a particular drill or skill is being applied. And so today I want to talk about 3 specific areas. And this is a struggle in today's world when it comes to we'll start with shooting. And you'll see a lot of coaches saying, we need to just focus on technique, just technique all the time, like just technique. And then you'll see the opposite end of the spectrum where you'll see just like rapid fire shots all the time. It's just quickness all the time. And it's weird where you see these two opposite ends and players get stuck on both ends versus understanding the context of how you should be developing your shot and really understanding that you need to follow a progression. And this is what you're not seeing. And typically because of the constraints of any situation, whether it's the coach or player, they're like, okay, I'm just going to keep working on my quickness. And so we want to understand the context. So this is to help players understand why coaches are putting something up or why a particular skill is being illustrated on social media. This way there's no confusion. And that's really the big thing, because I'll watch a clip and I'll be like, well, if I was a young player, I'd go out and just do this particular skill. They're like, okay, this is a 1,000 shot challenge. We want to work on shooting 1,000 pucks a week. And as a young player, I would have done that if I had access and had the ability to go do all those things. And the problem is if you don't understand the context of why you're shooting 1,000 pucks, then you're just going to go out and blow your arms out, ruin your technique, maybe not work on something specifically that you need to work on. And so it's really important to understand why they're shooting 1,000 pucks. And so I'll get some of my kids being like, oh, like these guys are such dummies. They're idiots. They're working on their shot. They're shooting 1,000 pucks. Like, that doesn't make any sense. I go, okay, well, wait a second. Like, did they never shoot pucks before? Do they not have the good habits of going out and shooting like you? And then they'll be like, oh, okay, that kind of makes sense, right? So if it's to help a player get into that habit of shooting pucks, then there you go. It's really important to start that. Do you want to shoot 1,000 pucks every week for the whole summer? Probably not the most effective way. There's probably more efficient ways to do that. And so you have to understand the context. And so once you understand that, you can really effectively develop your shot. So when you're trying to work on your shot, you got to really look at the different things that you're maybe deficient in. If you don't have a very quick release, you take a long time to shoot, then you're probably going to need to you'll work a little bit of your technique early on, but then you got to start really working on that quickness, really build that fast twitch muscles. You want to work on trying to get that quick release off. Now, if you have a quick release, but you can't get a lot of power and you can't really just go out there and you don't have a lot of like accuracy, then you got to go and work a little bit more on your technique. You got to focus in on some of those more details that you need to work on to really amplify your shot. So that's why context is so important. The next one is stick handling, and this one gets the most grief out of any skill. You'll see players really just working on flips and doing all this crazy stuff, and I'm guilty of it too. I'm going to say it out right here. I used to be like, you should never do this. That's the terrible thing, like it's a terrible habit to get into. And again, I didn't understand the context. For a lot of players, it gets them just involved. It gets them interested, at least at the very start. And that's why it's important to understand the context. And so with players, I used to be like, you should never do that. And now I go, okay, well, with our break time or with extra time, go out and work on that. Like if you want to have some fun, flip the puck around, no problem with that. So it's about understanding the context. Again, with the 1,000 shots, just like that. If you're just spending all your time saucing pucks off the roof of your house into a little net and spending 8 hours a day doing that, you're probably not going to get that much better. And so it's about understanding how much time you're really dedicating to your stick handling. And so you want to work on core skills just so you can build those base so that you can then again work on different creative stuff on the side, and then you can apply it in the game. Like Matthews had a clip, I think it was like 4 days ago, where he was in a one-on-one battle, lifted the defenseman's stick, came to the net, and he got it on his blade, picked it up, scooped it up like a shovel, and put it in the net. And it was unbelievable high skill goal. And the thing is now he can start applying it because he worked on the base skills. And then, of course, he was one of the first guys to be doing the Zorro. He was doing a whole bunch of other like fun stuff, I bet, like creative stuff. So coupling it all together, and now he's able to apply in a game. And that's where you're seeing more and more, especially in Europe, you'll see it, where at a younger age, you see a lot of players scoring some really creative goals. Now, is it going to apply all the time? No. But if you have the ability and you're making it more fun and engaging, you're spending more time playing. So let's not really knock it until we understand the context. And the last thing is going to be skating. And this one just has the most arguments, I'd say, because people will argue, again, right now, the big thing is outside edge. Outside edge is everything. We need to work on the outside edge. It's just like they're just drowning players with this outside edge. And the reality is that hockey players are naturally not going to be as strong on their outside edges, say, as like a figure skater or as most players. Like it's just always going to be something that, well, not always, it's just going to be something that we're not going to be great at. And some will be exceptional at it, but it's just something that we will struggle with. And you should work on it. And that's why it's important to start working on it, but it isn't everything. And that's the problem with right now you're seeing with skating is a lot of players just like focusing on the outside edge, but they forget they spend most of their time on their inside edges. If you watch guys like Crosby and McKinnon, they're in that tripod position, ankles collapsed in, really deep in those inside edges, and they're able to control and dictate play from this position. It's a puck protection and a scanning position, and it's really important. And so we have to find that balance. And really, again, it always comes back to understanding the context. And that's the biggest thing I want you to get from this episode is, so when you're watching stuff on social media and when you're trying to figure out a plan for how you can develop your game and really improve the areas that you feel are deficient and get your game to really that next level, skyrocket that game, really try to understand the context of why you're doing something. Really look at, okay, where do I struggle? And now you can implement it. Just because someone else is shooting 1,000 pucks a day doesn't mean you need to be doing that. Or if someone else is just working on technique and you need to work on your quickness, it's okay. Like, remember, you're different. And that's the biggest thing I want you to take out of this is understand that your needs are different than other players' needs. And this summer, especially with the COVID lockdown and very little time to work on ice stuff, you can really focus on really basic core skills in some areas that you're deficient on. Even go out on rollerblades or Mars blades and go and work on stuff. You can really focus in on the things that you need to work on. Stop worrying about what everyone else is doing. Everyone's going to have their own plan. And you got to remember, a lot of the times too, when you're on social media, there's a lot of marketing in there trying to force you to buy their product necessarily. And that's okay. Like, if it's a good product, you should buy it. Like, there's lots of great stuff out there, but there's a lot of stuff out there that is just trying to pull you in. And so you really have to understand the context of what you need to work on and why someone else might be doing some other type of skill development. And so when you understand the context, you can now make better decisions. You can make better decisions about your skill development, about your IQ development, about the areas of your game that you need to work on so that you can really start to develop in a healthy progression and start building your game up. Really have an all-around game so that you can, again, compete, excel, and dominate wherever you go out and play. And so that's what I want you to take out from this episode, is that context is key. Whether it's shooting, stick handling, or skating, don't really knock it until you understand that context, because when you do, now you can make better decisions, and now you can even implement some of that stuff in a better way, in a more effective way for you, or understand why you're not doing that, because you have to do something else. You need to do something else that needs to focus on your game. There's no cookie cutter like one way fits every single player. We want to focus in on the specific areas that you need to work on to really excel and develop your game. And so that's what I'm going to end the podcast on. I hope you enjoyed it. Really want to focus in on these key points to really hone in your development for what you need to do. Now, again, I always want to bring up that we have the IQ game course available. Hockey IQ development is that next frontier in hockey development, something that not a lot of people are talking about. Not a lot of people are really focusing on this area. And so it's a really effective system. It's a new, innovative, step-by-step process that focuses on the key principles of the game so that you can optimize your decision-making and recognize patterns that happen in the NHL and all levels of hockey. So if you're interested, make sure to message me. And also, I do on and off ice training online remotely so that you can work on the key areas that I talked about in this podcast here. So we can really focus in and identify the areas that you need to work on and amplify the strengths in your game. So with that, I want to say thank you for listening to the second podcast and look forward to some more insightful content to get your game to that next level.